Howdy ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to be teaching you how to depower your rack and pinion on your Mazda Miata. Let's get into it. So I'm going to go over all the tools you're going to need first. You're going to need a 3/8 ratchet with a 12mm 3/8 socket. Doesn't necessarily have to be 3/8, but you're going to need a 12mm socket and a ratchet. An adjustable wrench, a 17mm wrench, a paint marker, a 14mm socket, some pliers, flathead screwdriver that's strong and can hold up to a hammer, your hammer, some snap ring pliers, another ratchet, 1/2-inch ratchet, and a 21mm socket to match whatever ratchet you have, an inch-pound torque wrench, or Newton meters, depending on whatever country you're from. Something big enough to hold the rack and pinion when you have to break the inner tie rod ends off. I went ahead and got a monkey wrench because that's the only thing that would open big enough to hold the rack and pinion while I'm going to turn it. And last but not least, a grinder to cut the little piston off of the actual shaft when we get it all apart. So starting off, normally there'd be a splash shield down here, and normally there'd be an engine in your car, but this sweet build doesn't have an engine back in the car yet. We're gonna get this rack and pinion depowered, and then we're gonna get the engine back in the car. You wanna line up your steering wheel straight, because you might still have your wheels and your tires and everything on here, unlike I do. You're gonna wanna take a paint marker and line this up with your actual steering shaft. Go ahead and take your 12mm socket and your ratchet, loosen this bad boy up. With your wheel on or off, or however it is with your hub and spindles there, you want to take your adjustable and the 17mm wrench and break your nut loose. Once the nut is all the way backed off, you want to take your paint pen and go in there and mark your threads so that you know where to put your tie rod back on. So if you have this while this is held in the car, you can take a 12mm wrench and turn the actual rack apart from this and take it off. But in my case, I can just turn the tie rod out. Ooh, just like that. After that's off, you'll just go ahead on the other side and do the exact same thing you did here. We can take our ratchet and our 14mm socket and take these caps off. So the little steering knuckle in the car is giving us issues, but we'll worry about that after we rebuild the rack here. So we're going to pull this little clip back that is on this part of the inner tie rod. And this little twisty tie doohickey thing, we'll untwist it. Take that off, pull the boot off. So this next part here, we have to take each one of these tabs around the corners and bend them flat. So I'm going to go ahead and take that flathead screwdriver and a hammer and bend those out. Just like that. Alright, so now the tabs are off around the edges. We can pull these little rubber pieces off here. I'm going to put some Flyin Miata ones on when I get around to it anyways. Now I'm going to take my pipe wrench and put it on the big opening here on the rack, and my adjustable on the inner tie rod, and we will break that loose. Boom, just like that. Now we're going to repeat the same thing for the other side. Also, if you're wondering what size bolt head this is a 23mm. It appears. I went ahead and broke that loose real quick so I can get that out of there in case you still have power steering in your car and you're trying to do this. So now we got to remove this dust cap here. Go ahead, take that off. And we have a snap ring in here that we have to pull off. Just inside there. Come on. There we go. go ahead and take this guy off next here, this nut. Now we'll put this 14mm on this adjuster right here. There we go. Pull this out in order so we don't lose anything. Come on. Alright, we'll take that up like that. Now we're going to loosen up this bolt down here with a 21mm. Under that, inside this bad boy, we have a 17mm. Make sure you put something to hold this other side on here, but don't put it on the threads. Put it below the threads so you're able to put it back into the little steering knuckle. There's that nut. Put that with your other cap. Now we can go ahead and actually pull the pinion out. Maybe. Alright, now we'll go ahead and put this in that same spot again. Twist it a little bit. And there we go. Finally, and make a giant mess all over whatever work surface you're working on. There she is. There's the monster. And then we're going to pull this little bearing here out of the bottom. Should come out pretty easily. There we go. Just like that. And I thought I heard somebody say somewhere that you can use a fidget spinner bearing in here. Now we have to go to the other side of the rack and pinion, and there is a little metal clip that goes in around here, and you have to push through this little hole here and push that little clip out like that, and then you can go underneath it and go around and pull it off just like that. Now that we got a big old mess here, we're gonna go ahead and try and pull out on this side of the rack. Oh, yeah, there we go. Nice big mess, and there is our piece out. So our whole main reason for pulling all of this apart is so we can go ahead and we can cut this little ring off here. So we're gonna go ahead and take the little die grinder and cut little chunks of it off, and then knock that off of the shaft, because that is causing drag inside the rack, and it's not as efficient. So we're gonna go ahead and get that off of there. And there you have it, little pieces off of it there. I nicked it a little bit when coming down, but that shouldn't be too big of a deal in there. We don't need it no more. Go ahead and grab some grease here. Pop open the grease. We're going to take this after cleaning it all off. We're going to take some grease, and we're going to put some grease along here. Some fresh, delicious grease. And we're going to take and put a light layer of grease around the outside. Put this back in there in the center groove ever so nicely. Come on, mister. Through like that, and I made sure I cleaned out the inside of the actual rack itself too, because it was full of a bunch of nasty and grody grease. We're going to take this other piece over here that came out of this end of the rack, and we're going to glue this up and push it in, put them all together. Oh, there's so much grease all over the camera. There's grease over everything. We're going to take that clip that we removed earlier, take that, and put that in here. There we go. Well, sorry about the whole video being super dark. I went ahead and messed with my ISO settings, and I figured out what was wrong. I had it set that way because it was gonna be used for lightness outside. Now you can actually see everything I'm doing. It was probably fun darkness before. So we're gonna take the grease as well and put it all over the actual pinion. Boom, now the pinion's all greased, so we're gonna go ahead and put the pinion back inside the rack. Look at that. Booyah. Snap ring back in there. Booyah. And she is locked back in place. Go ahead and put your bearing in and tighten the nut down on the bottom. That's tight. Okay. Once again, I went ahead and held on the bottom below the splines so that I wouldn't mess anything up because I didn't want to stay in place. And we put the dust shield back in there. So this part's a little tricky. I went ahead and I took it out with this F that's on here facing down. So we want to go ahead and just put that back in there, just like that. And we're going to have to, when we put the adjuster in here, we need to make sure that we torque it down right and back it off a certain amount of degrees according to the Flyin Miata website. Otherwise, your steering could be too tight or it could be too loose, so you want to be just in the right area. So I put that plastic piece back on there. Now we're going to put the spring that was on there back in there. And then we're going to go ahead and put the adjuster on. I took the lock nut off of it for now just so we can put the adjuster in and get it adjusted down to the right point it should be at. So I'm going to get that started. And then we're going to go ahead and take our torque wrench and we want to set it to 43 inch-pounds or 4.86 newton meters, I think. Now we're going to go ahead and take our freshly set up wrench here and we're going to torque it 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And now we want to go ahead and back it off 25 degrees, which is roughly a 16th of a turn. So we're just going to go just that much. Just like that. And you want to go ahead and check after you get it to that point. You want to kind of feel, if it feels way too tight, you might want to back it off a few more degrees. I went ahead and had to do the same thing. So I went ahead and backed it off maybe 3 or 4 more degrees, and it's like at the perfect tension right now. So now we're going to go ahead and put the lock nut back on here. And then we're going to hold the outside here and hold the center. We don't want our pinion tensions to move at all. So we'll hold this, make sure this doesn't move, and then tighten down our lock nut. It's just like that. Now we're going to go ahead and install the inner tie rods back in, and we want to try and make sure that we line up the little square pieces back with their spot that they need to go in so that it locks it back in place. Alright, and then we want to take our screwdriver or whatever we have and hit the edges back over. And there we go. Now the clip is all around it, holding it down. Now that we got both the inner tie rods back in, we are going to go ahead and tie these boots up. There's that. I'm going to go ahead and still take off these fittings here, and I'm going to take this guy and use this as a spacer. I'm going to cut that right there and weld it up and put that in there as the spacer for this banjo bolt, and it should seal everything up, and I should be able to use this as my depowered rack. So woo woo. Installation back into the car is the same process as taking it out of the car. So just go ahead and do everything backwards and you should be able to get it back into the car no problem. To make sure everything was centered before putting it back in, I went ahead and measured the distance from the end of the tie rod to the center of the zip tie on this part right here where I put that. And I did the same thing on the other side to get it pretty close. I went ahead and made sure that was lined up straight, made sure that my wheel was in the correct straight position, not too many turns to the right, not too many turns to the left. I counted however many turns it was one way and then just went halfway back the other way, lined it up with the shaft and slid it back in and bolted it down, and it should be able to be aligned that way. I think everything will be good. That is how to depower your rack and pinion for the 90 to 95 Mazda Miata. Woo! I hope that tutorial has helped you, and if it has, make sure to drop a like down below and go over to the channel and check out more of this awesome build that's going on. Documented the whole painting part of it and every little thing that I'm doing to it. I'm just waiting for the rear subframe to come back in from being powder coated, and just installed a new rear main seal in the engine, and I'm going to clean it up a little bit, and then that's going to get dropped back in here, and then we can start wire tucking the engine bay and getting a little bit farther from there. So yeah, I think that's about it. Till next time, guys. Peace.